Mishna is good over here on the camera. And we are ready to talk about Barkhu. We're ready to talk about the Shema. Well, we're not going to talk about the Shema. We're going to talk about the brachas before the Shema, meaning the blessings. But before I get to that, we spent a whole lot of time talking about our good friend the Kaddish, making the minyan. We talked about saying Kaddish, talked about a whole bunch of fun stuff. Now we're going to talk about responding to Barkhu. So after you say the Kaddish, you immediately go into Barkhu. So you say the Kaddish. So to put it into context again, we talked about the laws of Psuki Zimra, no talking. Okay? You get to the end of the Psuki Zimra, you get to Yishtabach, no talking. Okay? We saw that back in 54. You get between Yishtabach and the Kaddish, you say the Kaddish. Again, no interruptions, no talking. There's leniency to make the brachas on your talis, your tefillin. If it was you started early in the morning, you could do it ahead of time. No talking. Now let's talk about Barkhu. What's the rule here about Barkhu? Okay, so you finish Kaddish, and you say, Barkhu es Hashem HaMavarach, when you're the Shliach Tzibur. Okay, and everyone says after him, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed. This is like one of the most consistent things in every nusach. Everyone says this the same way. Okay? And then the Shliach Tzibur repeats that, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed. Then you go into the brachas of Shema. Okay? So there's an Ashkenazi custom for the Shliach Tzibur to say Barkhu extra slow, and they add this other little prayer on the side. You'll see it printed on the Art Scrolls Siddur on page 82 on the inside towards the spine. But I don't think they translate that. So you'll see that there, but it's not something that a lot of people necessarily say. Okay. The Shliach Tzibur should say Barkhu loudly so that everyone can hear it and respond. Okay. Now you respond after him. Now, let's say you don't hear it. Okay. But you hear the Kehila, the people sitting there, respond Baruch Hashem. So that suffices. Okay. That would work. Now, if you only hear the Shliach Tzibur, he says, then you say Amen to that, like you're hearing a bracha. Okay, so if you missed it, so you walk in, he says Barkhu, the Kehila says Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed, and then he's repeating it afterwards, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed, and then you go into Shema. If you didn't get a chance to say it, just say Amen, and then you can go in. Okay, so the question is, why does Shliach Tzibur mix himself into the thing? So that way he should be part of the mavar, part of the reciting the blessing. Okay. So especially if there's 9 other people besides himself, he has to say it with them. So that way 10 people are reciting a davar shebekadusha, which we talked about 2 simanim ago. Okay. So that's the important part of it. Some people recite Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed, and people recite Amen after that, and that's a mistake. You only say it if you missed saying Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed. Okay? So if you say Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Olam V'ed, there's no reason to recite Amen after the first Barkhu. Okay? So that's the custom, it's not to recite Amen after that. And I also say, especially if we're not allowed to take a break in between anything to say. Okay? Now, the only time, now let's talk about the minhag the Ramah mentions. The Ramah mentions that little cute paragraph that's wrapped around Barkhu. That's only said if the Shliach Tzibur extends the Barkhu with a long tune, right? A nigun, as they're called. Okay? So, but, that is a custom. Not everybody does it. That is halacha aleph, halacha beis. They do translate it. Okay. Some places have the practice. It says the Shulchan Aruch brings down. It says a place that they cry out at their friends between Kaddish and Barkhu, and between Barkhu and Yotzer, or which is the beginning of the Berurah Shema, or to cry out about things that are necessary for the congregation, that's a mistake. Okay, so what they're saying over here is that there was actually times that people could do that. Okay, so people shouldn't do that. Okay, so what did they do? So the Kaf Chaim actually answers this. He says there used to be announcements that were made. Okay, remember to add this, remember to do that. That's not an appropriate custom because everyone's trying to hear, what the guy's saying and not listening to Barkhu. So that's why they say you should just keep quiet and not say anything. We'll talk about what's called the clopping system when we get to the laws of Shemona Esrei. There's this idea that you slap the table and it tells you what you need to do. And so that's kind of since this halacha is based on what we saw at the end of 54 and it's being brought up again over here as well, one should not interrupt, and therefore you should announce it. There are people who hold that you could announce it, meaning you can announce page numbers, other such things afterwards in order for people to find their place. It's considered Sarki Rabbim, but we're saying that you shouldn't even do that in this case. Let's talk about the laws of Kriya Shema and their brachos. 58. Okay, so let's talk about the time of the Kriya Shema for the morning, the Shachris Kriya Shema. So we're in 58:1 now. So what is the first time for Kriya Shema in the morning? That is the time when you can see your friend at a distance of 4 amos, so let's say about 4 feet, a little more than that. Okay, and recognize them. So they can stand a little bit they can stand like a full arm's reach away from you, and you can see them. Now again, we're talking about in a time period where there was not a lot of available light except for the light of the moon, and you could not see anybody in the darkness. The time for Kriya Shema then extends from that moment until the end of the first 3 hours of the day, which is 1/4 of the day. And the preferable mitzvah to perform is reciting it vasikim. Okay, vasikim is the word. So what is a vasik? And the Shulchan Aruch brings down that it's like one of the students. Vasik means someone who's prepared, and so therefore they love mitzvos, and therefore they are the most prepared. And that time of vasikim is the time when you are saying the Shema a little bit before the rising of the sun. We call it Hanetz HaChama. Okay, so some people call it Netz HaChama. It's called Hanetz HaChama. Netz HaChama actually would mean the flowering of the sun. Hanetz HaChama means the time when the sun first comes up. And why would you do that? Because then you want to conclude the Kriya Shema and its blessings with the actual moment of sunrise, and then recite the tefillah at the first instance of sunrise. And someone who is able to do this, their reward is great. How long is Netz HaChama? Well, the Ramah says that it is he says here that the length of time of sunrise is that it's about an hour. Okay, before the full sun rises on the ground. Now, that sounds a bit ridiculous about how long that is. Okay, so we're going to look at the commentaries, and we're going to see that this was actually a mistake in the printing that's been corrected later on by commentators. But let's start at the beginning over here. Let's talk about times for Shema. Okay. So the proper time for the Shema is also the same time for his blessings, which is the time when one could actually see their friend at a stance of about 4 amos. Okay, about a little over arm's length away. Okay, so how long is it? How well do you have to know them? How recognizable they have to be? So these things are just discussed, but it's basically that it's somebody that you could make out. The idea is that you could make out their face. Okay, so Some people get up as early as dawn, as the break of dawn. However, that that doesn't mean that that's the time when you're supposed to recite it. So the Shema defines the time for its recitation as it's when you're on your way, when you're at your home, when you're going to sleep, when you're rising up. Okay, and so the uvu kumecha is what we're referring to over here, the time when you're rising up. Okay, so some people say that at any point from when you rise up until sunrise, that would be an appropriate time for the Shema, and we're going to learn about that later on in the fourth halacha here. But since most people don't really get up until they have a little bit of sunlight, okay, and also because the parsha of tzitzis is in Shema, and that time's a little bit later. Therefore, the rabbis felt that the proper time for Shema is when you would also be able to put on your tzitzis in the morning. And they actually used to say that not only was it recognizing your friend, but also that you could recognize between the blue in the tzitzis to the white strings. Okay, and that is the same. Those are the same time. So basically, when you could look down and see the differentiation in the color. Okay, so even though the time of Shema is delayed, one is not allowed to go ahead and delay it at the end of that third hour. And the reason why we have that longer time is because the idea was that the people who had to get to work would get up at the earlier time of about a little bit before the break of dawn for sunrise. But people who, were a little bit more wealthy, didn't have to go to work so fast, they call them in halacha b'nei melachim, the princes, they would get up later. And so therefore, we would extend the time to allow for them to get up. Okay? And these 3 hours are counted from the break of dawn, known as Amud HaShachar. Okay? And that is according to the Magen Avraham. However, the Vilna Gaon says that time for those 3 hours starts at sunrise. So, nonetheless, it doesn't really matter because it's only in a difficult situation. You should wait till later. So you should try to get to say Shema within the first hour or two, of sunrise, because then everybody agrees. So the question only is when you get to the end of that third hour, okay. And so it's about a quarter of the day, whether it's the winter time or the summertime. The position of the sun is what makes the difference. Not the hours. So what you basically do, these are what's known as sha'os zvaniyos. These are considered halachic hours, and they are delineated through 12 parts. So that every single day is broken into 12 equal parts, and those will each be the length. So the hours are delineated by the amount of time of sunrise there is. So if there is less than 12 hours, full 60-minute hours, then the halachic hours will be shorter. And if there is more than 12 hours of sunlight, then the individual hours will be longer than 60 minutes, as long as you get your proper break out of the day. So for Kriyat Shema, you want the first quarter of the day, and that's what you're going to look for. So therefore, Mishna Berurah explains that in the winter you gotta rush to go say the Shema because it's a shorter day. Okay, now. He also says it actually may even be more difficult in the summertime because the day is so long, the sunrise is so early, and you might think, oh, normally I sleep till almost 9 o'clock, and I have all this extra time to go say the Shema. That's not the case in the summertime. In the summertime, because the sunrise is going to be 2.5 hours earlier, you're not going to have as much of a time if you're looking at the clock all the time. So therefore, you should always look to start early. And that's the appropriate time. And also, some people make the mistake of thinking that, that you should put it off. That you should not put it off. You could say it at home without being completely ready. Okay, and people who delay the shmas for their tzitzis or tefillin, that's a mistake. Okay. You should always recite the Shema in its proper time, even if you can't locate your tzitzis and your tefillin. And when you find them, you put them on, and then recite the Shema and another parsha with them. Okay? So you should always take precedence to recite the Shema within its appointed time. But we're going to learn later on that you really shouldn't recite it without talis and tefillin. But we're saying that it takes precedence over that. So some people also think that, oh, I can delay the recitation of Shema so I can go say Shema with the congregation because the congregation davens late. Nope, the Mishna says you should say it early. This is quite common in certain Hasidic congregations where they delay the times for davening. Not that this is a new thing, but they have perpetuated the custom. They won't start their services until 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So you should recite the Shema on its own, and then you can go recite everything else as long as it's before the end of the time of reciting proper time for tefillah in the morning, which is later. Okay, and we'll learn about that further. And we talked about before, back in Siman Memvav 46, that you should recite the Shema in the morning blessings in order not to have to run into this problem while waiting for the congregation to have a minyan to recite everything together. Okay, so that's really important to recite the Shema. The main time for getting the Shema together is right before the Shemona Esrei prayer. And that is when you should do it, in our case, when we're talking about Vasikin. So we're talking about Vasikin, you want to say the Shema right before Shemona Esrei. And so the main thing is to start the Shemona Esrei right with the time of sunrise. Okay, why? Because there's a verse in Tehillim that says, I should see you with the rising of the sun. I should make myself present to you. Okay, and we'll learn more about this in Siman 89. So, you really shouldn't start it ahead of time. And so that's why you should delay. That's the only time we should delay the Shema, is for the purpose of trying to get the tefillah to be at sunrise. So that's an important thing. Now, if you can't do that because of your needs to get to work and so on, that's okay, because it's just not considered a minhag vasik. It's not considered a prepared time. So if there's a way for you to make it so that every single tefillah that you do would be done in this fashion, that would be amazing. Because it's just, the idea is that you experience a certain you get a particular atmospheric experience that you would normally not get to experience unless you made the time for it and aimed for that time. So if you need to go earlier than the time, that's fine, even if you can't do that. Okay, so we talked about Hanetzachama. That is the moment when the sun begins to peak the tips of light over the mountains. Okay, so that's how the Berurah explains it. Technically, it is. It's not the only opinion over here. So he says has to go over the tips of the mountains. So there are others who say that it's a little bit more than that. Okay, so some people say that it should be calculated at sea level. Okay, so he's talking about seeing a little bit of light over the edges of the mountains. But some people say, no, it should be calculated at sea level. So some people say that if you're on the mountain, you have to adjust the time. Okay, so those are all important. Those are all important things in the halacha. Moving on, let's talk about the mistake in the Ramah here. Okay, so he makes it seem like there is a long time that one has for this. So the Mishna points out that some people say 10 minutes because the place he was quoting from says it should be 10 minutes long. But the Vilna Gaon argues that he says over here, 1/3 of 1/10 of an hour. So basically we're talking about 2 minutes. So that is what the Vilna Gaon wants to argue over here. So what is he talking about? so he says the following over here. It's actually in a long commentary of the Mishna Berurah, that there apparently was a lot of mistakes over here that were recorded. Okay, so we said first of all that according to one opinion, the time of day begins from the break of dawn. Okay, and so there's a time period from that until the sun comes up. So some people say that is 1 hour and 20 minutes. Okay, it's about 80 minutes. Okay, and so that basically means that there's a certain amount of time left for the amount of time that you would have this Misha Yakir time, and so that's going to be about another 10 minutes. Okay, so that would make the time of seeing the entire sun going from the very tips to the very top, so also be like another hour. But that is really just not the case. We just find that that's really just not the case. So that was the original thought process. That was the thought. Okay. So really the amount of time that the Mishnah Berurah points out is that it really takes about 12 minutes, and you really can't see the whole full sun yet. So really this time is much less. So the point is that you don't have to see the whole. One thing that they point out is that it's not talking about seeing the whole sun, and it's talking about the Neitz Hachama, and that is why he says it has to be the tips of it reaching the tops of the mountains, and that's why we're looking for a little bit of these little sparks of light coming out from the sea level, because that's when you're going to start seeing it rising over the tops of the mountains. Is your next physical manifestation of that experience. Okay, and so that's why he's saying that this time can't be correct. So he quotes the Vilna Gaon, is that it's really the 6 minutes, is the time period that you need in order to get everything done in that time, because you have a very, very small window after the time when it begins to reach over the top of the mountains, and so therefore it becomes much, much less time. So it's really only 2 minutes of actual time when you see the very, very tips of the sun coming over the mountains. So there's a lot in here. Okay, but the point is that it's not 100% seeing the whole sun as this amount of time implies, and that you have all this time to go ahead and say the Shema, but really we're talking about like 6 to 10 minutes, like right before the entire sun starts to come out, and really it's probably close to the 12, maybe more than that, just based on the angle of it before the whole sun really comes out. Now it's almost every little angle is a few minutes here or there. So what we're basically saying is that you have a very narrow window, and so what you should do is sometime about 6 to 12 minutes before the time appointed as sunrise at sea level, you should be starting, and then about 2 minutes after that is the end of the time period for Neitz Hachama. So complicated first law here in the laws of Shema, but it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't super complicated. Okay, so let's do number 2, and then we'll stop for today. It says the law number 2 is Im Lo Kara. If you didn't recite it before Haneitz Hachama, okay, well, say it as fast as you can, which is exactly what the Mishnah Berurah was saying. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah himself says, okay, we said that the last law was talking about the people who were really, really focused on doing the mitzvahs 100%. If you can do it at 95%, that's still very, very good. Okay. And frankly, he points out over here that this statement of the Shulchan Aruch is really a reproof some rebuke of the practices in many Ashkenazi communities where they really delay reciting Kriya Shema. And the point is that really people should take that mitzvah much more seriously. It's a bit of a rebuke to the Bnei Ashkenaz who take so long to get their davening started. Okay, and we'll learn later on that okay, so maybe you could take a little bit of time later on. We'll learn later on. That if you can't focus on having some coffee or tea, that's okay. But you definitely shouldn't sit down with your pals and have coffee and tea before you start davening. That's just not appropriate. So he said that's what the Mishnah Berurah brings down over here. I will make one little piece of commentary on that, which is I did actually go to a shtibel some 20-something years ago. When I walk in, we actually went and davened. The Vasikin, and what ended up happening was that we left before Musaf because we were supposed to go to this Ufruf. And if we get to the shtibel, the small synagogue that at which it was being held, that's exactly what people were doing. It actually wasn't an Ashkenaz place; it was a Nusach Smart place, but it was still Ashkenazi, and that's Hashem should be invited to the coffee. And so that should be the prayer should be a part of the focus of that. Yeah. So we walked in and I go, oh, they didn't even start yet. And like I said, look, there's a guy up in the front. So there's like 6 people in the back sitting having a coffee and some cake and kibitzing. And in the front there's some davening going on. So that's why we davened Vasikin, was because we were serious about davening. I mean, we could come here and the people there were not. But they should take at the very least a little bit of reproof to really focus on making davening a priority. So next time we will pick up with more laws of Shema and its blessings. We did a very deep dive into Shaus Manios today to explain it. Not a super deep, but deep enough. So everyone enjoy your day, and we will see you next time.